Welcome to M01 Rocketeers, the podcast by Maria01, the Nordics' leading startup community. Join us as we embark on an inspiring journey to explore the possible, the plausible, and the preferable futures, alongside the brightest minds of the Finnish startup scene.
Welcome to M01 Rocketeers. This is Camilla.
And this is Sarita.
From the Maria01 team. Joining us today are Antti Toponen, co-founder of Kuurai, and Teppo Hudson, CEO of Fibo. Would you like to share a few words about yourselves?
Sure, I can start. So I'm Teppo Hudson. I'm a founder and CEO and a kind of a partner in Fibo Labs, which is an AI consulting agency originally, but we are transforming right now towards tech investment and kind of becoming a tech VC, so to say, helping different portfolio companies in their AI journey. When and if they don't know how to do that.
So hi, I'm Antti Toponen, co-founder of Kuurai, a product data management platform, helping companies to turn their increasing regulatory burden into new business opportunities. Background as I'm a recovering lawyer and a failed future studies student, yeah.
Thank you. But first, let's listen to a story from the future.
Robotic revival. Fields that once struggled to yield little more than stunted hay are now a thriving ecosystem. Vibrant layers of diverse plant species, buzzing with life, and teeming with creatures both wild and domesticated. The once compacted, clay-heavy soil has transformed into rich, nutrient-packed humus, alive with potential. This land, passed down from my grandparents, had been dedicated to strawberry farming for decades, but with heavy reliance on non-organic fertilizers and pesticides. Over time, the soil became barren, yields dwindled, and as climate change intensified and pollinators disappeared, the farm was left to decay. 5 years ago, after my work hours were halved and remote work became the new norm, I moved to the farm. Robotic taxis made commuting easy, and with food prices skyrocketing due to climate change and global conflicts, I saw an opportunity to breathe new life into this land. The city center I once knew had become eerily quiet, its lively shops and restaurants replaced by automation, leaving empty streets behind. With the world shifting, I felt I had nothing to lose. Farming was foreign to me, but the rise of educational AI made learning quick and accessible. I embraced the challenge. When I needed hands-on guidance, experts from across the globe sent remote-controlled telepresence robots to assist me. More complex tasks, like pruning apple trees, were best learned through immersive virtual reality sessions. With the help of worm-like mini robots, I analyzed and transformed the soil, mimicking the role earthworms once played. Above, swarms of tiny drones pollinate plants, monitor their health, and gently deter pests like birds and rabbits. They also manage irrigation, organic fertilization, and even the harvesting process. My exoskeleton amplifies my strength and endurance, making it easier to balance the demands of my day job with the physical challenges of farming. Little by little, the land has been revived. The soil is fertile again, plants are thriving, and the return of wildlife, pollinators, birds, and even bees, marks the farm's rebirth. This once-forgotten farm is now flourishing, a living testament to the power of nature, with a little help from cutting-edge technology.
So, what were your initial thoughts after hearing the story?
I thought it's a nice, a bit dystopian image and view like a future where everything is kind of done by robots and nothing is done by humans, and you just get everything done and everything is so easy to do when robots handle it. I think it's a bit dystopian.
Yeah, I agree, especially the kind of idea that AI has kind of like, and automation has kind of destroyed the urban spaces, and what you need to do is to kind of go back to the wild, yeah, I think it's not the necessarily the image that I see people actually kind of enjoying. I think it's more on the side that actually you need to kind of go back to living from the land because you don't have any other opportunities. And at the same time, I kind of think that when you really start to think on how plausible it actually is that you at the same time have a huge kind of issue with not having actually kind of work, actually going back to farming, then do you actually have even the kind of necessary resources to utilize the kind of cutting edge technology? which I think that might not really kind of happen. But it might easily be that the ones that are not able to kind of share with the growth and prosperity that comes from AI are not really the ones that can utilize the advanced technologies that AI brings, but are more or less kind of forced to farm in the traditional sense.
Yeah, and I think, somebody has to pay and build those swarms of robots. Like you said, it might not be as cheap if, like, let's say Google creates these kind of robots and starts selling them worldwide. Will they sell them so cheaply that every single farmer has the capability to run such things? Because still the market probably decides how much the food will cost and da-da-da.
Of course, there was the balancing of the day job and farming, so not just farming.
Like if you have a chance to be a farmer who's doing it half of the time and then the second half doing something that's more, let's say, pays better, for example, would you still do that or just focus on being either or? I don't know.
But I can really see in that, though, like kind of the trend that happens now as well, that there has been a lot of people who've gone back to farming. And like this person as well was talking about like the land having been so barren. So I think that there's a lot of this kind of ecological aspect and the climate change as well. So I do see that a lot of educated people who live in the cities will do this in the future as well, take over some smaller plots and something like this. But it is a bit dystopian, the story in total. So
I do believe that when you look at the kind of, if you just focus on the part that where, for example, advanced technologies can help you farm, I think there it's clear that we do have a path to a future where you have a lot of advancement in how to kind of make terrain that is not able to be farmed at the moment to become more fertile and really gain kind of efficiency gains in farming. At the same time, I don't really necessarily see it happening so that individuals that now work in, let's say, as a in those jobs that require a lot of education, that they would actually then want to kind of jump out of the treadmill and go back to farming. I think that's kind of like the part that I'm not really kind of feeling the connection with. But I mean, of course, when we look at the kind of benefits that advanced technology is going to bring in farming, I think there is a that part I do kind of feel a connection with.
Yeah, it can really make it more efficient.
Definitely can.
So, in your opinion, how soon might we realistically see like flying cars, for example, or household robots, or wearable exoskeletons in everyday use?
We already have them, right? They're cleaning robots at home.
But like cooking robots, for example.
But yeah, I mean, this kind of like more generic robots or humanoid robots that are like, or are able to do the same stuff the same way as humans do, probably pretty soon, because, Tesla, for example, is already building them and they are kind of a semi-usable. But I think the question is, in this kind of context, exoskeletons and robots at home or flying cars, will they be like, I think they are more useful still on the work context, in the sense that your work is done faster with the humanoid robots at the logistics centers or somewhere else rather than like at your home. I'm not really sure, because of the costs, because of all the hassle that it takes to have a human-sized robot in your home all the time hanging out and doing stuff. Will that be like worth the 30,000 euros that you have to pay for it or something?
Yeah, I think it's like a question on like, do you really need it? I mean, like if let's take flying cars, for example. So if there is a clear kind of benefit, if there is a clear need for a flying car, I mean, we could have a flying car. Yeah. Like it's not something that is really out there. I think it's more on on the side that, well, what is the actual benefit? Like, what is the cost of actually building it, and what is the kind of seen benefit of having for example, a flying car.
I think some people will just want that because it's cool.
Yeah,
Sure. And then it will be like marginal.
Like for example, what is the use case for a flying car? Like okay,
going
so you
faster.
could, and you could kind of say that it could speed up traveling time, compared to, let's say, trains and everything. But at the end of the day, is it really, could you make it that it would be kind of like cheaper than, for example, going by train? Not really. So is it something that would be just a kind of luxury product? And if it's just a luxury product, then, there's no real kind of, demand for it. So I think for I think like the flying cars thing is it's like kind of like we look at the Jetsons and think like, well, flying cars would be cool, but then or Blade Runner, but then do we really need those? Probably not. I think the household robots is pretty much the same. So like, what is the actual kind of use case for you having, let's say, a humanoid robot somewhere? Like, I don't really see it. I mean, what you could have is in the same way that you have now, like, the robot cleaners and everything. That type of kind of like not going that deep into the kind of like you actually have a.
And like you can get the cleaning, you can get food, everything already done by different services, like food delivery services or the cleaning services. So I'm still thinking it from like the point of investing. I don't know. Let's say the robot cost 30,000 euros, like a small car worth of money. Would I invest that much to have the cleaning done by a robot, or would I just like buy it as a service that somebody comes and they handle the robots in a way for me?
But I think as technology advances, so all of these devices that we use, they are becoming more intelligent as well. We just this morning had a chat with a colleague about the robot vacuum cleaners that did people feel like this when the first dishwashers came out, that suddenly this feels like so revolutionary that you can actually have a robot like kind of going around independently and, doing the vacuuming. So in the future, there probably will be different devices that are taking over more tasks as well. But I don't really see like kind of this very long time sci-fi visions of having flying cars like as a very viable option. But they need to be kind of mass-produced products that are relevant for the masses in general.
And for sure, like the more like people who can afford it, they already use private planes all the time to get to places faster. And that is kind of like a flying car in a way. In the sense, except you can't drive it in the city, so to say.
And there are quite advanced prototypes already in the market.
But if you look at like cities, for example, like Sao Paulo, it's really common for people, like rich people, CEOs and so forth, to use helicopters to go from meeting to meeting. So they're like in a city environment that is already like a flying car, essentially. So.
And of course, the household robots could like help with the labor shortage in elderly care.
Again, I think household robots will be on like work context. Like you provide a service that does cleaning, you probably want to hire robots to do the cleaning rather than humans eventually, if those become available and mass-produced, or elderly care robots, or so on. But you as an individual wouldn't probably want to buy them to yourself as a kind of a thing, unless then become the same price point as a dishwasher. A few hundred euros max.
Yeah, and I also think that if we kind of look at the like bigger picture, and if we think that okay, so now we might have a shortage of kind of like labor in certain areas, but at the same time we also know that the efficiency gains that we get from, for example, using AI will disrupt a lot of kind of industries. So I would also kind of question that, do we actually get to a point where because at the same time, like advancement in technology leads to most likely some sort of increase in unemployment rates. So do you actually then kind of just hire those people, instead the technological kind of like unemployment, does it then kind of counter a lot of these type of kind of household kind of like service industries? So do you actually get to a point where you have a sufficient small investment that you would need to do into a household robot or whatever, if you can actually get the service still done by people and maybe even at a lower price? I mean, this is not a future that is particularly nice one, but I still kind of believe that is partially. On the exoskeleton parts, I think that I think that's like the clearly the most viable of these, because then you can actually kind of see the efficiency gains that you could actually get, and it could help a lot of people that don't necessarily have the kind of physical capabilities to perform tasks, and it can increase also the ways that people can actually work, for example. So I think that is clearly the kind of easiest use case to see that you would actually kind of like have in the future. The other ones, they're kind of like the flying cars, household robots, not really sure. I mean, if there would be a flying car, I don't know. I mean, it would be I would try, but yeah.
And in a way, like with the exoskeletons, I think there's a big difference in the sense that it's not really replacing what a human would do, but more enhancing. Yeah. And if you think about disabled people and so forth, so in that sense, kind of just helping in what we already do.
No need to hire a moving company, for example, to lift heavy things.
Yeah, true.
So what kinds of possibilities could automated mobility unlock? For example, freeing up space in the cities?
Probably a lot, in the sense, at least in these kind of cities of Helsinki size, so to say. But I think if you look at London or New York, or especially like Manhattan in New York, nobody owns any cars. If you live in the city there, you already are like automating your mobility in a sense, like instead of still there's no robot cars, but there's somebody else drives the car for you or use the public transportation. And still, if you look at those cities, there's a lot of space required for the kind of a mobility of not necessarily humans, but at least the logistics of things in a kind of a city like that. But maybe in a more like cities like Helsinki, which it's not as dense. People tend to have cars to drive them around because the availability of transportation or mobility is not as huge. It probably is even more bigger impacts, and we can have maybe parks and stuff instead of streets.
At the end of the day, like I'm not really sure if you would have like self-driving cars, for example, does it really then? I mean, you would need to have a kind of very different perspective on kind of like the mobility itself. So you wouldn't kind of own a car. Would you just kind of like then hail a RoboCab? That's one opportunity. So that then it would kind of like also release a lot of on investment that people need to do into cars. It will of course kind of like remove the need for having like parking spaces a huge amount in the city center. You could reutilize garages. So basically you could kind of see this scenario where it leads to kind of like urban spaces being rejuvenated, where you actually have a lot more life in the city centers. You could kind of like have higher density of people living together. It could be one kind of like additional mean of public transportation. But then at the same time, like if you think about the way that we now approach, for example, mobility and cars, would it just lead to a situation where you actually like have more cars because you don't need to even drive? You can all you have your own self-driving car. So is it really something that will kind of disrupt the whole thinking that we have about how we move, or is it just a kind of new way of doing the same thing that we're doing now? So do you just have like a lot of self-driving, even more kind of self-driving cars than you have now, and you own them, and then it just leads to a situation where the kind of like the benefits of having kind of like this type of method of automated mobility doesn't really, end up freeing up anything. It just ends up kind of, making things more problematic. I don't know.
I think the marketing messaging of this kind of robot cars or autonomous driving always forgets that stuff has to move, even if people don't own the car. So, like, have the cars parked on the streets. Somebody still has to bring in all the grocery store stuff, all the stuff that is sold in the city centers. Those have to get into the stores, even if it's robotic cars that bring them. They still have to get there somehow, and so you can't just like remove all the streets in the sense. But definitely the street parking for just private use is probably less.
And I think
required.
there's, like you said as well, that there's a fundamental maybe difference between like kind of a change that people would need to think very differently. Because if we think about the human nature of owning things, people would somehow have to change their way of thinking, like going from the fact that we've always owned things, like whether it's the axes from the Stone Age or, train tracks or whatnot that people have owned back in the day. So then in that sense, I don't really see that as something that would change, at least very quickly, that people would somehow fundamentally change into kind of being okay with having this shared ownership and using only public transport and so forth. So then in that case, we would have a lot more kind of cars.
Especially when you have kids and stuff, you
Exactly.
just want to have your car because life is so much easier.
Yeah, you need to have the car seats for the kids that are exactly, in specific ages and so forth. But then obviously, I mean, it could be that kind of the climate change and the climate crisis in general will force people to change their ways of thinking, that in the future you can't just own a car, or if there's some limitations or legal restrictions that you need to pay certain taxes if you own a car or whatnot. So then that is of course something that might change the behavior, but it's a bit like further away, I'd say.
And they might also become more expensive due to scarcity of materials.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I think like if you look at the facts that comes from like deaths in traffic injuries, I mean, that is I think that's like the leading cause of death for like 15 to 29-year-olds globally. So I mean, that's something that it could, help with. And of course, at the same time, and I checked the amount of people that actually work in the kind of like as drivers. And I think it was like 6% of people employed in the EU, at least from 2020, are employed as some sort of like as a driver, and 2.9% in the US. So if you kind of think that you would eliminate that part, it would also kind of cause a lot of mass employment into a, especially predominantly male, profession. And if you think that, what would the kind of political implications of that also be? Is there really kind of like, are we actually going towards, that scenario? Or at the end of the day, will kind of like, the political, economical implications of that be too kind of high that you don't actually see the kind of like governmental, political buy-in to that because the implications are so huge? I don't know.
That's actually a very interesting point, like considering that like in very many countries where you've had civil unrest and all that, it's always relatively lower educated men, young men that are kind of the cause of the frustration, or they are the ones who are then kind of driving that. So if we would have 6% of, men with lower education in EU suddenly unemployed, I think it would cause a lot of civil unrest. So.
Yeah.
Probably seeing that a little bit right now when we look at the political landscape right now is because, all the manufacturing went to China, all the low income works went to China, and in Europe the only way to get a proper life is to go through the educational path and get a higher degree education and then work in the kind of office work. And you don't have the option to just work. The the simple job, so to say.
And what do you think, could AI and automation help us live more sustainably? For example, aiding in the restoration and protection of natural environments, or in other ways as well?
Precision might be better, and everything like the text at the beginning about the dystopian future, probably that's like more effective and more productive way of doing things in the natural environment. I think there's one thing that should be thought is that still AI and all the robots and stuff, they require a lot of energy to run. So as long as the energy would be somehow delivered sustainably, then it's possible. I think in the Nordics we are already almost 100% sustainable energy because of the water from Norway and so on. But the rest of the world probably isn't. So it doesn't really help if the robots are running on coal power.
I fully agree. I mean, there's a lot of kind of like benefits that you can see on how living could be made more sustainable, how products could be made more sustainable through the use of AI. But then, the problem there is that you really do need a lot of energy, a lot of water, a lot of natural resources to then kind of support that part as well. I think the biggest issue is that how you actually kind of like create sustainable AI in a sense, because if you can kind of harness, like you mentioned, the kind of like the green energy, so that would kind of power the AI, then you could actually kind of see a lot more of the benefits. But I mean, when it comes to kind of improving the kind of inefficiency that we have today, I'm sure that there is a lot of things that will be done a lot differently in a more resource efficient manner. But then if we don't kind of like solve the problem with actually how to make AI sustainable, then the kind of efficiency gains that we would get from making things more resource efficient in the kind of like one level, if the AI is not kind of like sustainable AI is not solved, then we cannot lose the benefits quite quickly.
Also, I'm kind of thinking this from a larger angle as well, that not just like kind of what are the things that AI concretely could do to help in farming and etc., but more like generating data as well. That there's already a lot of these solutions where from satellite vision, AI, different automated solutions are able to recognize anomalies in the forest, for example, or in the the ice kind of coverage of the world and so forth. So then that we can act based on that data a lot better, because it's a lot more reliable data than what we had before. So I think their AI could have kind of in larger scale a huge impact, but most likely on a smaller scale in the future as well.
Or maybe reduce like overproduction, for example.
Waste product produced would probably be significantly lower. And it's a good point. Probably just generating the data is valuable already, rather than like putting all the energy on actually doing stuff automatically. But just generating data so that we know some things can be done better is valuable, and that probably doesn't require as much energy.
And one of the really cool things that I saw, for example, in Brazil last year is that there, where they have these farms that are so like gigantic that they are like basically the size of southern Finland entirely. So there they, for example, already are testing different sensor technologies that how can they kind of fertilize in a more efficient way, or if there's like water needed at some specific part of the farm but not in all of them, or what are the resources that are being kind of needed in different parts. So they already kind of use AI in the sense that there are sensors in different parts. So then it's becoming more efficient, but then hopefully in the future as well, more kind of sustainable in terms of the use of land and so forth.
And what are other major or even wicked challenges might AI help us tackle in the future?
One thing that I thought is that's probably very close to my personal life. I have 2 small kids at home. Is the kind of fertility rates, what's probably a lot of predictions are going on in the media right now that fertility is dropping and it's going to be a problem in about 50 to 100 years globally. So like what I see, some of the problems for fertility rate is that people are having kids later, And reasons why you're having kids later is that, all the pressures that you have in your life and work and so on, that you postpone the kids having later and later. And some said that you need, a female has to have the first kid by age 27 to have a 50% chance to have the second kid on average. So if automation and all that robotics could help you be less, there had to be less hassle at home or at work life or at private life, so that you can actually focus on the kids and it's not as, pressurizing to have the kids. That probably helps the fertility wicket problem.
How would that function in practice?
I don't know, but just the way I'm seeing, for example, having kids, it turned my life into kind of a timed. My calendar is timed to the dot every single day, 24/7, 7 weeks of the day. There's a certain time I have to wake up to get the kids to the kindergarten so that I can get to work at a certain time. Then I have to get out of work at a certain time to get the kids from the kindergarten. Then there's certain things at the, hobbies, and then you need to get the kids to the bed at a certain time. And then you maybe have half an hour for yourself at the end of the day to do your hobbies, so to say.
So maybe the household robot and the automated car would pick up your kids from the daycare, and you wouldn't have to.
That would be
That would be amazing.
helpful.
So there's the use case.
But then that kind of help would be really useful in a way, in the sense of less taking the pressures off from the parents, in the sense.
But I think there's already kind of a direction where we're going with that, in the sense that, and there's a bit of polarization in the society too, that there's parents who are wealthier and then parents, of course, that are not that wealthy. But then, for example, in the market, there's so many different technology-related solutions already that will make it kind of easier for you to have your kid fall asleep in the evening, or your baby, and monitor the baby at home or whatnot. So there's a lot of that stuff already that is mostly accessible to somewhat wealthier parents and not to kind of all the parents in the world. So I see that kind of field developing a lot, in the sense that, especially when people are having kids when they're older, so obviously they have more financial resources. So that I, for one at least, I always thought that whenever I can spend some money to make my life easier, so it's well worth it.
Oh, for sure.
I think that this kind of the whole kind of topic on what kind of wicked kind of problems or challenges AI could help us. I think it reminds me of a line from Simon and Garfunkel's song "The Sound of Silence," which goes and people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. So basically, you kind of you think that AI will help you tackle issues that are inherently very human, and is about kind of it's not that you have an actual solution, but it depends on your kind of viewpoints on what do you actually see as being beneficial. So I think in many ways, kind of this tech utopian kind of thing that AI helps us solve a huge amount of kind of very human problems. I don't see it really happening, mainly because of the fact that where you actually kind of have the biggest kind of challenges is where people don't really see eye to eye. And then their kind of technology usually can't help you to solve those issues, because they are not really issues that you can kind of compute and come up with the best possible solution, because of the fact that people really have very different views on what they see as being really important. And I also kind of feel that there is a certain lack of kind of belief in a plausible, positive future. And especially I would say that politicians are very not that adept nowadays to kind of paint the picture on what would a kind of good future look for us. And that kind of leads us to looking into technology, and especially now AI, as something that could really solve a huge number of issues, and then we don't really need to kind of, that much think about those anymore. And you just get the answer from the machine. It's like Deus ex machina kind of thing that then it will solve everything, and everything will be fine. But then at the end of the day, if we really think of how you could make a more positive future reality, it would kind of require you also to have a clear vision on what would that future look like. And I think that is kind of like what we're missing a bit. We have kind of like this very mundane stuff that politicians are focused on, and then you have at the same time kind of like this future where AI has kind of solved everything, and there's no clear way on how you would actually go there and what that future would look like.
Don't worry, engineers will figure it out.
Yeah.
But I fully agree that in a way I think kind of all these sort of dreams or visions about AI, they are very much like kind of coming from the fact that people struggle with certain things in their lives, and it would be nice to think that we have like a perfect solution for this and this and this problem. But I think kind of essentially what we talked about in the previous episode as well was that like to the end of the day, people are unreliable, unpredictable creatures that you don't really want to live your life either kind of based on certain rules that you always do this because this is the smart choice. Like people don't act like that, and we don't want to act like that either. So in that sense, automating the mundane tasks and making sure that the food is delivered to your door automatically and whatnot, that might be something that we might see in the future. But then the fact that kind of you would have everything, like all these sort of very core things of humanity kind of automated around you by AI, and we would essentially become machines ourselves and like live in that sort of world. So I don't really see that happening.
And people do want to have the kind of a random stuff in their life, and they probably end up creating random stuff just to make things more exciting, because when everything is the same and automated to the same way by the AI, you probably get bored and you want to do
Absolutely
something random every now and then.
Talking about preferred futures, how would your preferred future look like?
Somebody picking up my kids from the daycare. Of course, I believe myself in the AI doing or automating stuff, but I don't really think AI should automate my private life as much as my work life. Like, it would be awesome for the work part for me to just be on the beach and the AI just ask me to do this or that way, and I just say yes, no, and yes, no, and continue on the beach for my work. But still on my private, I think it's nice to cook myself sometimes. So it's nice to do walking or driving every now and then and stuff like that.
So maybe free up some more time to do what you will.
Essentially, probably like work is enjoyable as long as it's done fluently in a way. Like if there's a problem every day at work because of the AI creating some random stuff, that would be probably chaos. And I don't like that.
But it's actually funny that you say that, because I would much rather see AI automating some of the things in my private life than in my work life. So
maybe my work is too chaotic all the time.
Like I'm thinking that what I really like about my work is that I get to challenge myself like intellectually as well. And that's, for example, like even though I'm very big fan of like ChatGPT and all these, like I use them a lot as well. But I'm kind of worried as well that it makes me dumber in a way that I don't have to think that much that I have before, or use my language skills or something like that. But then at home, for example, I wouldn't mind AI cooking for me every single day. I hate cooking, so those things could very easily be automated. That would be a very ideal feature.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the preferred future, singularity. Well, no, as a joke, but I mean, the kind of the removal of really kind of like the mundane stuff, that would be, I think, something that really would be, on a personal level, something that would be a preferred future. But then at the same time, I kind of think that if we look at from a kind of larger perspective, I think for kind of like advancement of humanity, what we would kind of need to figure out is the fact that advancement in technology, advancement in AI should not create a larger gap that we have now when it comes to, the rich and the poor, to be very blunt, and also like the global south and the global north. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you don't really want to end up in a situation where you have this kind of like very dystopian scenario where you have the ones that have everything, and then a huge amount of people that don't have anything. I also kind of believe that one thing that we would need to tackle is that the global south is feeling, for example, climate change in a completely different way than the global north. So I mean, like it's those are the kind of things that we would need to address if we actually want to go to this kind of like the singularity type of scenario where everybody is happy and able to kind of like merge with artificial general intelligence and really be able to live their lives to the fullest. But if those individuals who are able to live life to the fullest and kind of look for self-realization in places is a very tiny portion of the global populace, then is that a future that we would want? And I would say that no, because then yeah.
And I would even go maybe a bit further, like talking about humanity, that it really like has to do with the survival of the humanity, that we could use these new technologies, AI or whichever other ones, to use the scarce resources in the most efficient way and not waste a single thing, and make sure that kind of we use the technology to assess how we can revive the nature and the ecosystems and all that, and of course in that sense as well help different parts of the world kind of cope with the climate change and so forth.
That is true. Probably we don't want to, the societies don't want to get back to the kind of a stone ages to prevent climate change. But if we want to continue the modern life, it has to be
exactly
like technology could enable it, and in a sense, but it enable it in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Thank you.